Haunted spaceship exposed in Antarctica, a sinister discovery from Earth's terrifying future. Clara's phone rang, slicing through another exhausting night shift. It was her uncle's frantic voice, panicked and breathless. Clara! You have to listen! I've found something amazing in Antarctica, a ship! But I'm in danger! You must come! A shiver crawled up her spine, a chill deeper than the frigid winter air. She nearly hung up, but the thought of her 13-year-old son Ethan echoed in her mind. They needed a break. They needed adventure. She agreed, heart racing with both fear and excitement. Days later, as they landed in Antarctica, the sight was both breathtaking and haunting. Endless white landscapes stretched out, remnants of a once heated world now frozen in time. But that's when the cold seeped in not from the weather, but something darker, almost malevolent. Mom, are you sure about this? Ethan's voice trembled. The plane's engines faded, replaced by the eerie silence of the icy desert. Clara felt it too. A sense of foreboding gripped her heart. With her uncle missing, they followed his last known coordinates, stumbling through blinding snow and biting wind. Hours slipped by, each step heavier than the last. The air grew thick with mystery and dread. Finally, they stumbled upon an abandoned military base, buried in the ice, like a ghost from a time long past. Look at this! Ethan shouted, pointing at a hulking spacecraft, half buried but somehow gleaming with a sinister allure. Clara's breath caught in her throat, and a cold sweat trickled down her back. Are you sure we should go in? She whispered, unease nagging at her. But curiosity tugged at her. They ventured inside, and the door creaked open, revealing dark shadows. The air was stale, heavy with the smell of rust and decay. As they scavenged through the wreckage, they uncovered journals filled with pages of twisted experiments. Disparate entries warned of horror unleashed, secrets kept at the cost of humanity. Clara felt a pang of terror wedging itself into her chest, her heart racing with each word she read. Ethan stumbled backward, eyes wide. Mom! I'm feeling weird. He clutched his head, panic flashing across his face. The nightmares began that night, visions of fear, whispers entwined with apparitions dancing on the edges of their minds. Clara's heart sank. The emotions of doubt, failure, and loss flooded back, haunting them. Through the icy walls, shadows began to pulse as if the ghosts of the past wanted them to know their pain. Clara's relationship with Ethan seemed to shift. She began to doubt her choices as a mother, as the entity fed on their vulnerabilities. Each page turn brought escalating dread, crafting an inescapable web around them. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Panic sliced through Clara as they neared the heart of the ship. We need to leave now, she yelled. Ethan nodded, but before they could retreat, a guttural sound reverberated through the craft, a low, haunting growl that merged with the whistling wind outside. A shadow flickered in the corner of their vision. Was it real? Or was it the entity they had awakened? Clara tightened her grip on Ethan's hand, adrenaline coursing through her veins as desperation clawed at her insides. The dark secrets were coming alive, and as reality twisted around them, she realized, escaping was no longer just about leaving the ship. It was about confronting whatever awaited in the shadows. The growl reverberated through the darkened hall, chilling Clara to her core. She felt her heart race, pounding against her ribs like a desperate prisoner trying to escape. We have to move, she urged, dragging Ethan along the narrow corridor. With every step, the shadows seemed to shift, morphing into grotesque shapes that taunted her as they passed. She kept her eyes trained ahead, but the icy breath of dread tinged the air. Something was watching them. Mom, what was that? Ethan's voice trembled, eyes darting around, desperation bubbling in them. I don't know, Clara breathed, forced to swallow her own rising panic. She dared a glance behind them, half expecting to see a monstrous form creeping closer, but the darkness clung to its secrets. The ship was alive, its walls whispering, suffocating her senses. They reached a doorway, the flickering lights above casting eerie shadows against the cracked walls. Clara pushed her way through, and the sight that met them stole her breath. Control panels blipped with static, illuminated screens flashing indecipherable data. But the most unsettling was the wall of glass giant, opaque, showing the frozen wasteland outside and something else, shadows moving within the ice. "What is that?" Ethan pointed, his voice barely above a whisper. Terror rooted Clara to the spot. "I don't know." Suddenly, the metallic floor groaned beneath them, a warning. A noise erupted from the other side of the glass, jagged breathing mingling with slow, deliberate movements. Clara steeled herself, grabbing Ethan's arm. "We need to go. Now!" As they stumbled back to the hallway, the abyss seemed to beckon with open arms, and the oppressive weight of dread curled around them, a noose tightening with each passing moment. The shadows flickered again, this time more solid. Clara felt it, a presence, something ancient and hungry. Ethan started to scream, a sound that clawed at Clara's heart. "Mom! Get it away!" He was shaking, and she could feel their connection tremble, fraying under the weight of terror. "Focus, Ethan! We're going to get out. Just hold on to me." She pulled him closer, sensing the thin line between fear and complete despair pull taut. As they sprinted, a sudden flash of light erupted behind them, a blaze of heat that contrasted sharply with the frigid air. Clara glanced back. A creature emerged from the shadows, a creature formed from the nightmares written in the journals, a wretched amalgam of ice and void. The thing lumbered forward, its limbs twisting unnaturally, filling the corridor with an overwhelming stench of decay. Panic surged through Clara. They had to reach the exit. "Run!" she shouted, adrenaline flooding her veins as they raced back towards the ship's entry. A shocking realization hit her. This was no ordinary entity but something far beyond. "Ethan, listen! We can't let it touch us." Breathless, they turned a corner, fast choices converging. Clara spotted a different exit at the other end of the corridor. Hope surged, but the creature's guttural roar echoed through the walls, shaking her resolve. But as they ran, flames ignited around them, flickering wildly. An explosion echoed, the ship shivering as if in response to their panic. Clara felt the heat against her back, the creature's darkness creeping ever closer with each heartbeat. Ethan stumbled, fear clawing his voice. "Mom! What is happening?" Desperation rang in his plea. "We're almost there," Clara urged, reaching the exit. But just as they burst through, the world around them shifted. A cold wind pierced through the shuddering frame of the ship, and the icy wasteland looked different. Shadows battled against the blinding sunlight, and the sound of the growl loudened. A voice, dark and bone-chilling, whispered through the air, "You cannot escape." Clara turned, her resolve shattering as a realization struck. Something sinister bound her to this place, deeper than any experiment unleashed. Dread, despair, and terror swirled within her. The shadows loomed larger, entwining with her thoughts. Clara clutched Ethan's arm tightly as the ground beneath them trembled with the weight of their fate. They had awakened something far more powerful than they understood. Ending it here felt impossible, but the shadows beckoned, and the whispers grew louder, promising understanding, but at what cost? She turned, stricken by a thought. A chance for salvation lay with whatever had come from the depths. But how much of her humanity would she have to sacrifice? The icy wind howled like a banshee, circling them as Clara and Ethan stood frozen, fear pooling in their stomachs. Ethereal shadows danced before their eyes, clawing at their minds, whispering secrets in a language older than time itself. "Mom!" Ethan trembled, his small frame quaking beside her. "What is happening? Where are we?" Clara's heart raced. She tightened her grip on Ethan, grounding him against the impending doom. "I don't know. Just stay close." The landscape stretched before them, a horizon of white and gray, shifting in disarray. The ship loomed behind with a presence that felt predatory. Shadows swirled in and out of the icy expanse, each flickering figure taunting them as if waiting for the right moment to strike. "Can we go back inside?" Ethan's voice quivered, uncertainty etched across his face. "No!" Clara hissed, the echo of the growl still pulsating in her ears. "We can't go back there. Not now." With that, she propelled them forward, a wintry wasteland stretching endlessly. Each labored step sank into the frozen ground, the snow crunching beneath their feet like bones snapping in the dark. They pushed through the biting cold, but every breath was an effort. Dread hung thick in the atmosphere. Suddenly, the air crackled. The ground began to shudder as the shadows coalesced into sinister forms, swirling together, arrayed like wolves on the prowl. The shrill cries of the frozen wasteland enveloped them, clawing at Clara's sanity. She turned, searching for safety. "Look!" Ethan screamed, pointing to the distance where a faint shimmer glowed, a promise of warmth amid the glacial chill. "Let us go!" Clara shouted, urgency igniting her muscles. They raced towards the shimmering glow, but with every stride, the presence behind them grew heavier, its breath a ghostly chill against the nape of her neck. The shadows receded slightly, revealing a tall figure cloaked in darkness, a silhouette with an outline that seemed to shift and flicker. It stood at the edge of the glimmering light, beckoning them, its form swirling like smoke. "Closer, come closer," it called, the voice wrapping around Clara's mind, seductive and inviting. "Don't listen to it, Ethan!" Clara gritted her teeth, forcing herself to look away. But the whispers tinged her thoughts, poisoning her resolve. What if this was their chance? What if it held the key? Would the price be worth it? Ethan's eyes widened, an inexplicable force pulling him toward the figure. Clara's heart raced, panicking as she reached out to pull him back. "Ethan! No! Stay with me!" Her voice shattered the spell momentarily, and he hesitated. I feel it too, Mom. It wants us. Good or bad?" Clara spat, a tendril of fear lacing her words. He looked up at her, confusion clouding his young face. "I don't know." That uncertainty gnawed at her, a mortal question in a land stitched with horrors. She could see the dark figure stretching its arms, shadow fingers curling temptingly. Her instincts screamed at her to run. "Let us go!" Clara shouted again, panic driving every syllable. They darted toward the light, urgency pumping through them. But the shadows surged back, the darkness swelling to fill the void. The growl echoed louder, reverberating around them. "Run!" With frantic energy, they sprinted toward the shimmer, but the ground trembled violently, throwing them off balance. Clara stumbled, pulling Ethan upright, but they could feel something beneath the ice, an awakening, an angry thrumming. "Mom!" Ethan screamed as the shadows began to swirl and converge, ripping the fabric of reality apart, revealing fractured faces, anguished and twisted. "Keep running!" she screamed, the chill of despair wrapping around them like chains. Just when the tension reached a breaking point, a sudden warmth rushed over Clara. She stumbled on a metallic surface, the feeling familiar and devoid of ice, like a hand extending from the abyss. A doorway appeared, glowing faintly, hundreds of languages murmuring their prophecy. "Mom!" Ethan's voice broke, but she pushed forward without looking back, aware they were closer to salvation or an even deeper horror. But deep inside, fear fermented what awaited them on the other side of that door. As they dashed through, shadows curled at their heels, desperate to keep their prey. The chilling whispers fell silent momentarily, then surged with a new vigor as Clara slammed the door shut behind them. But the quiet was short-lived. A heavy thump resonated against the metal, sending shivers through her bones, echoing the truth: they'd only just begun their nightmare. "What now?" Clara whispered, the weight of dread settling in the darkness of the new space. Ethan's eyes, wide and glistening with curiosity, drifted to the flickering screens around them. "What are they saying?" The pulsating light illuminated a single word: surrender. Clara stepped back, heart pounding, as fear gripped her again. "What have we awakened?" Before she could respond, the screen flickered, revealing something horrific, a vision of what awaited them if they didn't find a way out. The shadows were waiting. And the voice whispered once more, "You cannot escape." Ethan's gaze darted across the screen, scanning for any sign of hope amid the chaos. "Mom, look!" he shouted, gripping her arm. The images showcased twisted corridors, once bustling with life, now choked with darkness. Faces contorted with terror flashed by, eyes wide in desperation. "Stop it!" Clara yelled at the screen, as if her voice alone could silence the horrors unfolding. The pulsating lights reflected off the sweat glistening on her forehead, a tremor running through her body. "We've got to find a way out." "Where do we go?" he asked, his small voice trembling, bouncing off the metal walls. "What if they come for us?" Clara's heart sank. She didn't know how to reassure him. She glanced around, desperate for a plan, but darkness engulfed every corner, and the heavy silence pressed down like a lead weight. The only sound was the rhythmic thumping against the door behind them, a macabre countdown to an unseen menace. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to think clearly. "We need to find another exit. Somewhere they can't reach us." If they were still in the ship, what had they stepped into? Where was this place, really? "A door!" Ethan shouted, pointing toward a narrow passageway to the left, barely visible in the dim light. "Look!" Without waiting for another word, Clara gripped his hand tightly. They raced down the corridor, their footsteps echoing hollowly amidst the silence. Shadows leaped alongside them, flickering just beyond the edges of their vision, whispering taunts in a language that chilled her to the bone. "Mom!" Ethan's voice was a desperate plea. She could feel the heaviness of his fear. "What if they're down here?" "Shoo, just keep moving," she hissed, not daring to look behind. The pressure of the unknown pressed against her, suffocating. Was it fear or something else that crept closer with every frantic step? The corridor twisted and turned, each corner a trial of their resolve. Shapes flitted out of her peripheral vision, skirting just beyond her line of sight. Clara felt the air grow thick, and the shadows seemed to pulse with a will of their own, wrapping tighter around her. She glanced back at Ethan, his eyes wide and glistening. "Stay close." They emerged into a small chamber, the air stale and cold, yet beneath that chill, Clara sensed something warmer lurking in the shadows. A series of screens lined the walls, their flickering displays revealing broken snippets of past events, fragments of lives lived here, moments of dread. "Mom, look!" Ethan gasped, pointing toward a screen showing a mother and child, just like them, frozen in time. They wore expressions of horror, lips moving in silent screams. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She recognized that look, it mirrored her own. Then, a sudden lurching sensation filled the room. The ship seemed to tremble again, as if it knew they were there, as if it hungered for their fear. The lights flickered ominously, and the rhythmic thumping from the door returned, louder now, filled with an angry cadence. "We need to hide," Ethan said, the panic threading through every word. "No!" Clara shouted, confidence slipping as dread gnawed at her stomach. They couldn't hide. They had to keep moving, had to find a way out of this nightmare. "We need to find something we can use. A weapon, anything." As if in response, the screens erupted into a cacophony of voices and images, filling the space with chaotic sounds that clawed at their sanity. Words shouted in panic merged with desperate cries until it became a single anguished roar that enveloped them. "Run!" she shouted, lunging toward a door on the far side of the chamber. But in that moment, all screens lit up with a single phrase, chilling her to the bone. "Join us!" The door slammed shut behind them with an explosive bang, and Clara spun around, heart hammering. They were trapped. "Through here." Ethan pointed toward a small vent in the corner of the room, barely large enough to fit through. But there was no time. The thumps were growing closer, more defined, a heavy presence bearing down. A low growl filled the air, vibrating through the floor. Clara could feel it deep within her bones. "Mom, what do we do?" Ethan cried, terror stark in his eyes. "Hold on," Clara whispered fiercely, adrenaline surging. She focused on the vent, and with determination, pushed Ethan forward. "Get in! Quickly!" The darkness behind them roared, a feral cry that reverberated through the metal walls. As Clara shoved Ethan through the vent, the weight of the shadows bore down heavier than ever. She barely slipped in after him, the growl intensifying just behind them. The passage was narrow, the cold air biting as they crawled. Every second felt heavy with weight. Clara glanced over her shoulder at the murky darkness creeping toward them, feeling the shadows claw at her back. But something was ahead, a flicker of light illuminating a new escape. Was this hope, or another trap? "Ethan, keep moving!" she urged, her heart racing, shadows snapping at their heels. "What if it's another trick?" he whined as they inched forward. "Then we'll face it together," she yelled, pushing herself to crawl faster, and just as they slipped through the vent and into the unknown, the growl erupted into a wail, a sound deep with rage and sorrow that echoed in the darkness. Whatever awaited them on the other side, it couldn't be worse than what they'd left behind, or could it? Clara braced herself for what lay beyond, question lingering in her mind. What awaited them in this new chamber? They tumbled into the next chamber, landing on a cold, metallic floor. Clara caught herself, pushing up to scan their surroundings. The flickering light above barely illuminated the steep walls, making the shadows seem to twist and breathe around them. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, almost as if the very room was holding its breath. "Where are we?" Ethan whispered, his voice trembling as he scrambled to his feet. Clara shushed him, fear making her heart pound in her throat. "I don't know, keep your voice down." She instinctively pressed her back against the wall, peering around. The space felt impossibly vast yet strangely contained, like a box ready to close in on them. Glittering shards of what looked like glass scattered across the ground, reflecting the dim light in eerie shapes. "Mom, look!" Ethan pointed toward the far side of the room, where a large console stood, covered in a thin veil of dust. It flickered ominously, random symbols and numbers blinking across the screen. "Maybe it can help us." "Stay close. I'll check it out." Clara took a cautious step forward, drawn to the glow. The console seemed almost inviting, yet she felt a knot of dread tugging at her stomach. Each step felt like a descent into an unseen pit, and the shadows seemed to close in tighter. The air tinge was static, as if the room was alive. But then she heard it, a soft, whispering sound layered beneath the hum of the console, a tangle of voices woven together, rising like fog through the cracks of her mind. As they grew louder, she spun around, searching for the source. Nothing. Just the shadows, watching. "Mom! What's wrong?" Ethan whined, his small hands gripping her arm tightly. "Did you hear that?" Clara forced the words out, confusion and dread swirling within her. "What?" he asked, eyes wide as he scanned the room. "The whispers? There's something not right." She pulled him closer, unable to shake the feeling that they were not alone. The lights began to flicker more violently, bathing the console in flashes of sickly greens and yellows. The voices intensified, a cacophony of despair that clawed at the edges of her brain, drawing her in as if they were trying to share a secret, and then silence. Clara gripped Ethan's hand tighter, her pulse racing. "We shouldn't be here," she whispered, but before she could turn to run, a shadow darted across her vision. "Mom!" Ethan shrieked, pointing. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw something moving in the dark, a form that blurred and shifted as though it belonged to another reality. Clara's breath caught. Was it the shape of a person? No, it was too twisted, melting and reforming amidst the shadows. "Run!" she screamed, dragging Ethan with her, legs pumping furiously as they raced toward the flickering console. They lurched inside a slim corridor branching off the chamber, breathless and frantic. Behind them, a guttural growl erupted, ripping through the silence like a blade, cutting off any last vestige of hope in the air. Clara's heart pounded in rhythm with their footsteps echoing against the metallic walls. "Mom, it's coming! What do we do?" Ethan cried, panic-laced desperation filling his voice. "I don't know," she shouted back. The corridor was an endless tunnel, the shadows looming larger with every step. There had to be something, a doorway, a hatch, something to escape this nightmare. Anxiety twisted in her stomach as she shoved her way further, the thudding footsteps growing louder behind them, full of wrath and hunger. But as they reached a junction, An unexpected sight halted her breath. Another screen. That screen was flashing violently, features from familiar spaces on board the ship, filled with frantic faces, each one twisted in horror. Clara recoiled, feeling their desperation seep into her skin. They knew they had seen this place before. "Mom, we can't stop." Ethan pulled at her arm, urging her to go. And then the growl turned into something worse, a high, piercing scream that reverberated through the walls, chilling Clara to her core. She spun, heart racing, the blind panic taking over. Where would they go now? "Choose, Clara!" A voice suddenly echoed through the chamber, deep and taunting, reverberating around her. "Choose to join them or be consumed." Ethan tugged at her sleeve, eyes wide with fright, but Clara felt paralyzed, the weight of the choice settling heavy over her. What would she choose when the darkness threatened to swallow them whole? As the shadows began to stretch closer, Clara realized now was not the time to choose. They had to run. But where would they run to? The wail of despair mingled with the growl of hunger, leaving Clara with a singular, terrifying thought: what was truly waiting for them in the depths of this haunted ship? The thought raced in her mind as they sprinted toward the unknown, the ominous whispers trailing behind them like a sinister promise. Would they find freedom, or would they become part of the darkness that ensnared them? The corridor stretched indefinitely, and Clara's mind raced, panic fueling each desperate stride. The console's sickly lights illuminated their path in eerie pulses, casting spectral rays that flickered and distorted the shadows. The sounds of pursuit grew more distinct, a low growl morphing into chilling, dissonant laughter that echoed off the walls. "Mom! Please!" Ethan's cries pierced through the cacophony, his voice trembling like leaves in a storm. Clara could feel his fear, raw and hopeless. She glanced down, quickly searching his face for comfort, something to hold on to in this suffocating horror. But his wide eyes reflected only terror. "Keep going! Just keep running!" she urged, shoving through the corridor, her heart like a drum in her chest, each beat a reminder of their urgency. Suddenly, an opening loomed ahead, a doorway gaping like a mouth ready to swallow them whole. With a fierce determination, Clara lunged forward, pulling Ethan along in her wake. Just as the laughter rose to a haunting crescendo behind them, they stumbled into what looked like a control room, filled with strange machinery and screens flickering with images that made her stomach turn. Faces stared back at her from the screens, distorted, desperate, and screaming. She recognized one. Jake, their neighbor. He had come aboard the ship for a tour. His face twisted with agony, his words muffled and lost within the whir of machinery. Panic licked at her resolve. "We can't stay here!" Clara shouted, dragging Ethan further into the room. The room was cramped, the walls vibrating with the deep thud of something approaching. They were moving toward a large panel, a massive door looming at the far end, an exit of sorts, but it looked sealed tight. Clara's mind flickered with frantic thoughts. How could they escape? What if they never left this nightmare? "Mom, help them!" Ethan cried, pointing to the tortured faces on the screen, but Clara could only shake her head. "No! We have to save ourselves!" she snapped, desperation clawing at her. Just then, the screens blinked, and a voice boomed from the apparatus around them, a voice both commanding and sinister. "You have an opportunity. Choose wisely, and you may save them." Clara staggered back, fear settling cold in her bones. "What do you want from us?" she shouted into the darkness of the room. "Make your selection," it replied, the tone dripping with mockery. "One must be sacrificed to save the others. A simple choice, isn't it?" Her breath quickened, her eyes darting between the locked door and the screens showing their friends. The walls seemed to close in, and the laughter transformed into a maddening roar, rattling her resolve. Ethan grabbed her hand, his small fingers trembling, fear radiating off him like heat. "Mom, we can't, please. We have to help them." His voice trembled like a candle in the wind, fighting against the overwhelming dread. It felt like a noose tightening around her throat. Clara closed her eyes briefly, trying to find clarity amidst the chaos. But the reality crashed over her again like a wave. If they stayed, they would die. If she chose wrongly. Ethan. The thought rippled through her like ice. Choose, Clara! The voice reverberated, flooding her thoughts with urgency and dread. Or you will all perish! Sweat poured down her back as she glanced at Ethan, seeing the desperation etched in his features. The echo of the growls grew near, a reminder that time was against them. Wasn't there another way? Was there a way to save them all? Mom! Choose! Ethan begged again, trembling so hard Clara feared he might break. She looked back at the tortured faces, their suffering an imprint on her heart. The choice loomed, but no choice came without a price. Clara felt her stomach knot painfully, helplessness thrumming in her veins. How was she supposed to choose? The door behind them suddenly creaked, drawing Clara's attention. In the shadows beyond, a form lurked, shifting unnaturally, a grotesque blend of human and something else, something dark. Do you understand what is at stake? The voice hissed, closer. Now, the growling melding with the chilling laughter. Mom, make it stop! Ethan cried, the walls pulsing with rising dread. As the figures got closer, Clara could almost feel its claws reaching for her. In that moment, she knew this would require more than just a choice. When the darkness, cold and suffocating, threatened to consume them whole, Clara realized there was only one possibility left. What if the answer to break the cycle lay in the heart of the terror itself? Would she have the strength to confront the darkness and find a way for them all to escape? The shadows danced closer, and Clara prepared to shout, but the words twisted in her throat. The moment of truth was at hand, and she felt the relentless grasp of time tightening around her like a vice. Would they escape, or would they plunge deeper into the hellish abyss of the ship? The air twisted, heavy with that sickening certainty of dread. Clara's heart raced as the grotesque shadow slithered closer, its malformed features barely discernible in the dim light. It seemed to hum, vibrating with a malevolence that clawed at her insides. She gripped Ethan's hand tighter, feeling the pulse of his fear echo through their connected bodies. Mom, it's coming! Ethan's voice broke, each syllable trembling like dried leaves in a bitter wind. No! Clara snapped, voice raw as she turned toward the screens, their flickering images distorting into a haze of panic. She had been about to make a choice, but now it felt like the entire ship was alive, hungry, and they were the prey. The faces on the screens screamed silently, mouths wide in horror that echoed Clara's own internal turmoil. Choose or perish! The voice boomed, shaking the very foundations of the room. Sweat trickled down Clara's neck, mingling with an unshakable sense of despair. Every inch of her screamed for survival, but the weight of her choices crushed down harder than any physical force. Without thinking, she lunged toward the nearest console, fingers flying over the buttons. They glowed ominously beneath her touch, each option a road paved with death. Desperate images roared through her mind. She saw her little family, the moments spent around the dinner table, Ethan's laughter in the backyard. They flickered like the screens, fragile and fading. The approaching shadow paused, and Clara sensed malevolence swirling around it, a thing that fed on fear. She needed to focus. Ethan, stay behind me, she ordered, eyes scanning for anything that resembled a weapon or a way out. The panel buzzed to life, and images flashed across it, a montage of previous selections, people screaming, their identities lost in the twilight of terror. In stark contrast, the voice came again, this time more hushed yet insistent. One must be consumed to save the rest. Whom do you choose? The child, the parents, the friends, or yourself? Shut up! She yelled, pushing buttons at random, the screen lighting up in disarray. It felt like playing a game with lives, a dark, twisted game where lives were tokens, and she loathed how readily they were traded. Mom, please! Ethan whispered, eyes wide with fear and desperation. I can't lose you! Her heart stopped at his words. She couldn't decide who to sacrifice. The terror that clothed the room thickened into a tangible shroud, smothering her thoughts, dark and seductive, urging a decision. Clara felt trapped in a nightmare, her fingers trembling, sweat pooling in her palms. Suddenly, the door they came through rattled again, the weight of the shadow pressing against it, like some cosmic beast intent on escaping its confinement. Choose, Clara! The voice hissed, and the room shook as the entity clawed at the door, the sound like nails scraping metal. It seeped into her mind, poisoning her thoughts, drowning her in possibilities. "Mom! Do something!" Ethan shrieked, panic bleeding into his voice as he tugged at her perfectly rational mind. Clara spun, face distorted with fear, but determination kindled in her gut. "I won't let you take us. I won't choose." Her voice rang through the room like a defiant bell, echoing against the walls of horror. But with her outcry came a violent reaction. The machinery grinded, lights flickered more violently, and the grotesque thing lunged forward, mouth open, revealing teeth too many and too sharp. Shadows unfurled like smoke, twisting and shifting, threatening to swallow them both whole. As Clara pushed Ethan behind her, she felt a surge of something, certainly not bravery, but perhaps some raw instinct to survive that ignited within her. In that moment of clarity, she understood. The true choice wasn't whom to sacrifice but how to fight against what was coming. And just as the shadow lunged, Clara's mind raced toward a far more dangerous option. If they couldn't choose, perhaps it was time to unchoose everything they thought they knew. The walls buckled under the pressure, stretching in monstrous ways. Would confronting the truth save them, or would it lead to oblivion? Clara drew a shaky breath, poised for the next step, knowing they were running out of time and options. Would they brave the unknown to plunge deeper into that terrifying abyss, or would they find strength in unity? All she knew was when the next moment arrived, only one truth resided in her heart. Survival would demand they face the darkness together. The shadow lunged, a blur of darkness and hunger, but Clara stood firm, heart hammering like a war drum, pulse throbbing in her throat. Ethan's grip was like a vice, and she sensed his fear mingling with her own, a cocktail of dread thick enough to choke on. "Mom, please!" he whimpered, terror etched into every crevice of his young face. Clara's mind raced. This entity, this monster, was not just a threat but a puzzle, an enigma clad in fear. She caught a glimpse of the console, the buttons trembling under her fingers, pulsing like a heartbeat, as though each pressed key could either doom or save them. "Unchoose," she whispered to herself, as the room distorted around her. The voice echoed in her ears, a nagging parasite feeding off her resolve. Choose or perish. A flicker in her mind, a memory of her family gathered, laughing, dissolved into the chaos encroaching on them. Around them, the screens flickered in violent bursts, displaying fractured faces, haunted echoes of despair. Clara pushed her hands over the buttons with frantic motion, but nothing made sense. Fragments of screams filled her ears, gooey with regret. The ship's walls groaned as the brute force of the shadow pressed against the door, metal shrieking in protest. "Mom!" Ethan screamed again, a plea that slashed through the smoke of terror. "Ethan, trust me!" Clara shouted back, a wave of desperation pushing her forward. Even as she shouted, she felt doubt coil around her thoughts. But a glimmer of clarity pierced through like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She needed to turn the tables, to refuse the game. Maybe, just maybe. Clara started, adrenaline sharp in her veins. If we don't choose anything, it loses power. With a sudden burst of courage, she faced the entity, eyes narrowing in defiance. "We don't choose at all." The walls trembled with anger, shadows swirling violently. The room exploded with a banshee's wail of hatred, raking against her senses. Clara glanced at the console, a brightly blinking button screaming for her attention. No selection led to doom. Not in the way envisioned. "Mom!" Ethan shouted again, his voice a mixture of fear and confusion. "Stay with me, buddy!" She felt the warmth of his hand, a lifeline amidst the chaos. Drawing them deeper into firm determination, she slammed her palm on the brightest button, unleashing a surge of energy that pulsed through the room like an earthquake. The screeching intensified, and the dark shape faltered. For a moment, just a moment, it hung suspended, teetering between this realm and something darker, as if Clara's choice destabilized its very essence. "Do it! Do it now!" Clara urged, knowing time was ebbing away. Ethan's curiosity flickered through his fear. He mirrored her determination. Together, they hammered the button, darkness raging around them, wails blending into a cacophony. There was no escape, only relentless fury against the entity. Flickering lights dimmed, shadows swirled in panic. The shadow lunged again. This time, Clara met its advance head-on, pushing through its essence that felt like ice cutting through the air. If they fought the choice, maybe they'd reclaim their lives. Suddenly, everything froze: the creature, the room, even the sounds suspended in time. The screens exploded with light, images engulfing them, sending a rush of heat and cold spiraling through every nerve in her body. Then silence fell. An eerie calm wrapped around them as if the universe held its breath. Clara's heart thudded like a war drum against this strange void, an ominous feeling creeping back. "Mom?" Ethan's voice sliced through the quiet, fragile and small. Nothing stirred. Clara felt an overwhelming wave of uncertainty. Was this an expulsion of the nightmare? Or a deceptive calm before the storm? From within the silence, a whisper emerged, cold and sinister. It echoed through the walls, chilling her to the bone. "You chose wrong." Tension spiraled, and Clara's heart raced anew. What had she unleashed? What price awaited for their scorn of the choice? Ahead loomed a thick, dark mist, swirling and moving as if alive and waiting. She clutched Ethan's hand tighter as dread coiled in the air around them, pulsing in time with her heart. Before them, an ominous glow flickered in the heart of the darkness, drawing them closer. A new choice lay ahead. But this was not a game, and they were not players. They were prey. What horrors lurked in the depths of that shimmering void? And what awaited them if they stepped closer? With the darkness beckoning, Clara felt their fates intertwining once more. Clara squinted into the shimmer, half expecting the void to swallow them whole. The air crackled with an electric energy, as if the mist hummed with sentient intent. Each pulse sent her heart racing faster, each soft sound more alarming than the last. "Mom, what is that?" Ethan whispered, his voice quivering like a fragile leaf caught in a storm. "I don't know." The words barely found form in her throat. The glow pulsed ominously, drawing them closer, wrapping around them like an invisible thread. Clara's instincts screamed to run, to flee this place where shadows held dominion. But Ethan's grip was unwavering, desperation tethering them together in sheer survival. "Stay close," she urged, feeling a cold sweat coat her palms. "No matter what happens, don't let go." They edged forward, caught between fear and the inexplicable pull of the light. Clara forced her mind to race, to grasp at something familiar in the chaos. A choice. What did they need to do? As they approached, the mist began to twist into shapes, fingers of darkness reaching out, grasping at their memories, their hopes. Clara could almost hear soft whispers weaving through the air, echoes of her past woven tightly with Ethan's future. "Mom," Ethan trembled, eyes wide with horror. "It wants to take us." "No!" She tightened her grip on him, her voice a fierce whisper now. "We want to let it." The glow flickered, morphing into vivid images, happiness tamed into nightmares. Familial laughter twisted into screams, her son's smiling face sliced apart by the skeletal hands of the shadow. Clara felt bile rise in her throat. "Choose!" A voice hissed from the depths, slithering through the air like smoke. "Choose what?" Clara barked back, anger igniting her resolve. "What can we choose when every choice leads to suffering?" In an instant, the darkness surged toward them, a tidal wave of despair. The room reverberated. Lights exploded in a cacophony of chaos. Clara felt the mist coiling around her ankles, dragging her down, trying to seep into the cracks of her mind. "Mom! Fight it!" Ethan's voice jolted her. The silence had morphed into a palpable tension, each heartbeat resonating with dread. Clara exhaled sharply, forcing herself to think. They had resisted. Mired in this unwilling game, they could push back with ingenuity, create new choices through defiance. "Fight!" She yelled louder this time, feeling strength surge. Desperation ignited a power within. Clara closed her eyes and envisioned the warmth of her family, brightening the dark enclosure around them. She focused solely on that luminescence, refusing to let the shadows twist her intentions. The air vibrated with energy, and she felt Ethan's unwavering belief in her. They weren't merely players, They were warriors facing an insatiable hunger. "Let us push it back," Clara cried, flinging her arms wide, summoning the light from within. The darkness shrieked, a sound like metal tearing apart, and she felt a pulse as both light and shadow clashed in a cataclysmic dance. The void flickered wildly, colors bursting like fireworks amidst the black backdrop. Suddenly, for a heartbeat in that collision, the shadows receded, revealing a door and exit shimmering with fractured light. "Mom! Look!" Ethan exclaimed, hope seeping into his voice. "Don't stop, Ethan! We can make it!" Clara shouted, bolting forward, pulling him with her. But just as they approached the opening, the shadows lunged, rushing back like a living blanket, desperate to reclaim its prey. Clara felt the darkness clawing at her, desperate fingers wrapping around her ankles, pulling her down. "No! Not again!" With one final heave, she reached for the door, but a single tendril snagged her wrist, a cold grip that sent icy fear coursing through every fiber of her being. The whispers grew louder, feral and vicious, enveloping them. The air crackled with malice, each syllable piercing like ice. "You cannot escape, the choice was never yours," the words twisted in her mind, reverberating through her thoughts with sickening amusement. What awaited them on the other side? And was it truly an escape, or merely a doorway to another horror crouching in the corners of existence? As they strained against the shadows, Clara felt the undeniable truth spiral into panic. There were no choices left, only consequences. The darkness tugged harder, almost laughing as it gained ground. As Clara and Ethan faced the uncertainty ahead, something behind them, something ancient and hungry, shifted. Were they truly brave enough to cross that threshold? Would this be their salvation or their ultimate doom? The mist whispered promises of hidden horrors, beckoning them deep into the heart of the unknown. Would they choose to confront it, or allow it to consume them whole? Clara gasped, the room closing in around them as they fought against the invasive darkness. The doors shimmered ahead, a beacon amidst the chaos, but the shadows clawed at Clara's mind, whispering sweet doubts and enticing her to surrender. "You cannot escape," they hissed, echoing in her ears like a macabre symphony. "Mom!" Ethan cried, his voice barely piercing through the din. "We have to go!" A surge of urgency propelled Clara forward, drowning out the whispers. "Ethan, hold on to me!" Clenching his hand tighter, she pressed onward, feeling the weight of shadows pressing against their backs. With every step, the thing behind them snarled, its breath icy and suffocating. She could almost sense its hunger, a ravenous beast desperate to reclaim what it had lost. But Clara's heart burned with a fierce hope. She could feel the warmth of Ethan beside her, bolstering her resolve. "We're almost there," she shouted, pushing through the despair that threatened to swallow them in one greedy gulp. As they reached the door, Clara's heart raced. The darkness coiled around her, trying to pull her back, but she wouldn't let it win. "This is it!" she shouted, hoisting Ethan as she barreled through the shimmering threshold. The world exploded in light. Bright white engulfed them, flooding their senses with warmth, cutting through their cold dread like a knife. Clara stumbled as they emerged, landing hard on solid ground. The oppressive weight of the shadows faded fast, replaced by a familiar air, one that felt alive with possibility and promise. She lifted her head, blinking against the brightness. Ethan wriggled free, scrambling upright. "Mom, we did it!" His voice trembled with disbelief and elation. "We did," Clara whispered, awash with relief. They were outside, amidst a vast expanse of untouched snow under a bright sky, the ship looming ominously in the distance. But something was different. The air felt cleaner, lighter. The shadows that had pursued them seemed to shrink back, whisper their final threats, but not with the power they once held. "I don't think it can follow us here," Clara breathed, turning to face Ethan, whose eyes sparkled with unshed tears. "We're free." Ethan wrapped his arms around her, squeezing tightly. Clara's heart swelled as she held him close, warmth flooding through her as if banishing the remnants of fear. Together, they had faced the darkness, and they had prevailed. "Look!" Ethan's voice cut through her moment of bliss. He pointed towards the ship, where a shimmering light erupted from its hull, pulsating like a heartbeat. What is that? Clara squinted, a surge of concern knotting her stomach. I think it's leaving, he exclaimed, as the light enveloped the ship and shadows poured from its very seams, swirling away into the horizon like reluctant ghosts retreating under fresh dawn. With a final shudder, the ship trembled, and then stood still, surrendering whatever dark essence within it, illuminating the icy ground with an ethereal glow. Clara felt a strange sense of closure as the malevolence faded. It wasn't a defeat. It was an invitation to release whatever unspeakable forces had bounded, a release she and Ethan had instigated. With the chaos transitioning behind them, Clara turned to Ethan, the first inkling of hope igniting. Let us go home, she suggested, putting an arm around his shoulders. The world felt vast before them, the infinite possibilities of a new beginning unfurling like a blanket of snow under the sun's gaze. Can we take a different route? Ethan asked, glancing around at the endless white expanse. Clara chuckled, realizing he wanted to explore this new world. Absolutely, she said, her heart swelling with affection for her brave boy. Let us make it an adventure. As they moved forward, hand in hand, Clara knew the past would always echo, but it wouldn't define them. They had faced the darkness together, and emerged stronger, anchored in the promise of tomorrow, where sunlight kissed their cheeks, and the shadows could only linger in memory. This was more than survival, it was a rebirth. As they took their first steps into a new dawn, Clara let the cold wind whip through her hair, carrying away fragments of fear. The future lay ahead, alive, vivid, just waiting for them to claim it. And with that, Clara took a breath that filled her with life, relief washing over her. They had done it. They had defied the dark. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. And don't wait even one more second, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.